All right. So the first one to get started, we've got the YouTube stream going. So there's that. Far as any status updates, something slightly related to the sub team is more or less an announcement of sorts that the Google Summer of Code through the CNCF is accepting projects right now. That is definitely something that we should probably take advantage of. I believe the deadline for that is the 14th. So that would be sometime next week, but obviously don't wait to the last minute. I just this morning submitted and got accepted for one of the cache flag options issues that we had in PAC. And so that'll be something that hopefully I can mentor somebody through in getting that implemented. Again, the opportunities are there for just about anything on any layer, as long as there's code involved, they're more than happy to accept those. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me. That's one of the things that I'm working on right now. Any other status updates, mentions? All right, if there are none there, we can move over to release planning. If I'm not mistaken, I'll have to look at the slide here, but we are, or sorry, David did put up an RC for PAC 024. And so that was last Thursday. I believe that should be going out tomorrow if all goes well. I personally haven't heard any issues with that, so I think that's still the plan. Okay, next we have RFCs. So for RFCs on the platform side of things, we really only have one. Maybe there really should be two, but the one currently listed is for support of pack.toml. This is more or less the idea of having a different file that would be checked in with source code. And there's a couple of reasons why this exists. There's a long history. If you want to get into that, we could do that. But basically, pack.toml would be the configuration of pack in a file format that then pack would read. And it's supposed to work with project descriptor, or more or less kind of add some functionality there. So if you have any thoughts on that, interested in that, you can go ahead and review that RFC. It is currently marked as blocked because we are working on some other changes for project descriptor and what's called a prepare phase, which I'll go ahead and add that label to the prepare phase as well. Or actually, I don't think that I can. So we might have to wait for the working group in order to be able to do that. Okay, I lied. I was able to do it. Okay, let's see. I think, yeah, if we refresh, that should show it now. I think that's pretty much it for all these standing items. If I missed anything, please feel free to jump in. Other than that, we can move on to the other topics. I think someone had a question about remove stacks RFC.
I put that there. I think I put that there, and then I went back and I looked at the spec issue, which was created for, looks like RFC number 172. And I saw your last comment, Javier, that was the builder distribution spec is sort of like, was a milestone before we can start thinking about the stack removal stuff. I'm interested in it because it at one point has been floated that stack removal should be sort of figured out before we can really completely figure out the support Docker files track of work. So I'm just like trying to keep tabs on it, but I don't know if there's anything to say. Just brought it up to kind of wonder what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah. That's a good thought. I will tell you that I believe while you were out in one of the implementation meetings, Emily and I discussed what the potential strategy for going through the implementation of that would look like. Specifically, like let's say the builder through Pack creates builders, and we were kind of trying to figure out what the best strategy would be to like kind of keep that sort of backwards compatibility aspect necessary, the least path of breakage. And we do have some plans there. I honestly don't know exactly though where that priority lands and who's really slated to do that work. It would be selfish and probably also not ideal to say that, hey, I'd be doing that. Although I am very interested in it. I do know that there's other things going on as well. So yeah, I think figuring out exactly how that's going to go about is probably something that we need to tackle. The other tidbit that you mentioned was sort of how this should or shouldn't coordinate with the support Docker files implementation. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts have been on that. Is one slated to be done before the other? Is one going to block the other? Or are they going to have to be released essentially on the same version, which I think would be probably the worst case scenario?
Be honest, I haven't thought about it too carefully, so I don't know. I have to dig into that and tell you what I think.
Yeah, because I guess if I'm not mistaken, both of these greatly impact most, if not all, of the specifications, right? And I think that's the part of concern is that I think we're wanting and hoping to have every specification be independent and then therefore be able to operate almost interchangeably in some form or fashion to keep that compatibility, at least somewhat stable. And so, yeah, I think that's going to require a large effort in planning. The part that I think maybe you're poking at is who's doing the planning and how are we going about that? And maybe we should have a task force, right? Or a what do they call it in the kids world? A tag, right? They went from SIGs to tags, but I think this is more ephemeral, right? Like it would only live for the purpose of this one task, which is to release these two items, these two large breaking or two large changes through the process. That's honestly the only thing I can think of because, yeah, I haven't given it much thought. Sounds like, I think you just said you haven't. And so I don't know who is. I think we're all just equally afraid that at the amount of work and the coordination necessary. But if we don't face it, I don't see how it would work out.
Yeah. It could be that we didn't get to the point yet of needing to, right? Because I think the Docker file stuff is sort of.
Is it POC style right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it could, I'm like still catching up, but I see us kind of getting to a place where we might be ready to ship like an experimental or, some kind of not, ready for production thing that people can use to try it out. And at that point, we might ask ourselves, okay, are we going to be boxing ourselves in here if we don't figure out how this plays with the stack removal stuff? Right, but we're not quite there yet with the proof of concept, so maybe, we just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, so is the order of operations intended right now? It's like we started with an RFC, right? And everybody kind of aligned on the idea behind it, and then said, but we need a POC to prove out the implementation and maybe limitations thereof. And that's the stage we're at. But then I would assume that would influence finalizing the RFC and or creating the spec, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
the spec before we ship. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, we would ship the spec before we ship like our software. To my mind, I mean, like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel like the POC has driven out, like when I look at the RFC, I feel like, okay, all my questions are answered, but without giving the POC out for people to experiment with, there could be stuff we don't know, still unresolved.
Just so that I'm clear, when you say give it out, it sounds like you're hoping to have a decent amount of testers as opposed to just having a, off branch, an off release or something like that. Like you're maybe wanting to include it in the release under like an experimental flag or something like that. Is that like, what is the strategy there? Maybe.
I don't think we established what we want. There's kind of a couple things we could try. I'm sort of the opinion that an experimental API might be a good idea.
Okay. I wonder if that's what's the best avenue to tackle that? Would it be during working group when hopefully we have more people than just us brainstorm this?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And then I think maybe in the same vein, we could talk about when we're ready, kind of establishing a quote unquote task force to coordinate both efforts and make sure that we do it in a reasonable manner. I think I like that. I mean, we still haven't really found the answer to the prior question though, like who's actually going to be working on the stack removal stuff. Is that something VMware is hoping to assist with? Or are we kind of waiting for other people to have more of a need for it to pick it up?
I'm not sure. I guess it would determine, it would be determined by, if this is going to be a blocker for us to ship other stuff, it might become higher priority. But as far as I know, I mean, I haven't heard much from the community, right? Like I don't know who's asking for this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I were to throw my opinion, I'm asking for it only because I'm asking for 1.0. And people are telling me that 1.0 will not happen unless we remove stacks. That's, not solidified anywhere, but that is at least what I've gathered thus far. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, it sounds like we're just gonna wait to see where the Dr. Paul POC goes, and then if that blocks something like this, or sorry, if we find that the stack removal is blocking something, then we would put a little more focus on that. But the builder spec and distribution spec, those are going out, right? Like I am pushing for that to go out. So I think we'll be ready there. It's just, again, the implementation part of it. Cool. Anything else on this topic? All right, next we have implications for platform of removing daemon support. I think you're muted, Juan. We can't hear you.
Let me see.
There, that worked. That worked.
Okay. Yeah, I put that one there. I was thinking on maybe we can have a little brainstorming. I know the RFC for removing the daemon, it's still on evaluation, and I hope to try to find some consensus on which potential solution will be the approach we would like to go forward. But depending, no matter what solution we decide on life cycle side, I was thinking on, okay, if maybe we can start on the implications from platform perspective. I was trying to check the spec, for example, and let me see, let me show here. Yeah, if I go here into the spec, yes, and I then search for daemon here, then yeah, right now I can see in the spec that we are only maybe exposing the flag to deal with the daemon on platform side, right? Some environment variables and stuff, and then some behavior on what you should expect or not if the flag is enabled. But it seems that that's the only thing we are mentioned on the platform specification right now, right? So if I think on what we are planning to do, and it's actually delegating responsibilities into the platform, for me, it looks like more well, probably we will require to mention in the spec that now platform has to deal with the daemon somehow, with yeah, somehow. But I can't see any other implications right now. So that's more or less why I put the things, because for me is okay, maybe we are not going to remove the flags and stuff we are exposing for platform, because we are expecting to still work with the daemon, but it's not going to be responsibility from lifecycle perspective. Now it's the platform who has to take care of it. So maybe this is not going to change, but maybe somehow here we will have to put that behavior and that responsibility. I don't know. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I would definitely. I'm gonna kind of just like spit out everything that's in my mind. But like I definitely see the daemon going away from the spec, right? Like there's no reason for the flag to exist and be passed to the
Okay.
because the life cycle isn't changing behaviors at that point in time. So it becomes irrelevant right now. Right now, the reason why that flag is necessary is because then it looks up and communicates through the socket, right?
Okay.
So that wouldn't be necessary. And kind of in the same vein, the platform is taking care of the daemon. But one of the things that I will say, you mentioned that maybe we want to add some wording that says that the platforms will take care of the daemon or something like that. I don't think that's necessary either.
Okay.
Right? Because platforms, only PAC cares about the daemon, right? Other platforms most likely will not care about the daemon at all.
Okay, and we don't want to force them to take care about that, putting that in the spec.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So it's like we're not going to tell them like that they should run Linux, right? On their personal workstations or something like that. Or So there's no reason why we should tell them anything about the daemon. So I would say that just the daemon does not exist for the context of this conversation, right? When we're talking about
Okay.
on spec, there's no mention of daemon because it's not a directly supported feature, if that makes sense.
Okay. And okay. And how from backward compatibility will we will need to think on how do that transition without breaking something not right. I mean, if you're using a version of pack that it's actually dealing with the daemon there, then if you upgrade and yeah, it's will be that an issue from user perspective? We will have to tell them something about it, or no? Maybe if you're going to still want daemon, you want to interact with the daemon, then okay, you will have to use a old version from lifecycle that it's going to do that for you.
There's no, well, I say this, but in general, there is no difference between daemon and registry execution from the lifecycle's perspective. There's a couple like minor little things that change, but in the great scheme of things, there's no operational difference between daemon and registry.
Okay, yeah.
From the perspective. And so what we are going to do is that like that doesn't impact the user, right? But we're gonna mitigate like that same behavior that they expect where they want their images loaded into the daemon by default, for instance, right? So if you do like a pack build, my app, that needs to be loaded into the daemon. But now pack is the one that loads it into the daemon. And
okay, but okay, so packet's going to keep things working in the same way, but we are not going to put that in the spec. It's because pack is going to do it for you.
yes.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. Okay.
And then I know that what we talked about was, or I don't know, Natalie, we had a conversation about how OCI layout is probably not going to work out for us because of the, those are maybe shocked face. But yeah, I think Jesse threw out a couple of pretty major concerns, primarily those that have to do with the Docker file implementation. And the real kind of issue is the from operation. So really, if I want to like simplify it, if we do OCI layout, then the images have to be pre-existing on the file system, right? When you execute lifecycle. So that means that any sort of like registry lookups or anything like that are not going to function. And so with Docker files, and let's say there's an RFC, I believe that Sam brought up, where the Docker file has a from, and that from becomes the run image, right? That becomes dynamic now, right? And so there's sort of like an inherited requirement to have dynamic image lookups. And because of that, the OCI layout strategy is not going to work. I'm waiting for you to process all of this. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, how does it work now, right? So right now, if you're running against a registry, we just say, okay, well, you know, the references you provide must be reachable, right? Because like that's a prerequisite, right, for it to work. And if you're running against a daemon, doesn't Pack download the images first? If you have like a pull policy is, if not present, let's say, Pack would pull your images first. So like Pack is doing kind of the work necessary to ensure that the lifecycle is going to find that image on the daemon if it's requested, right?
Not necessarily true, right? If I'm not mistaken, the life cycle, since it has direct connection to the daemon, can and maybe already does do additional pulling,
Do additional stuff. Oh,
right? Because it could fetches. If it's using image util, it could do a pull from that.
I have to look and see what we do, because I think there's some cases where I'll have to look and see at what part of the code, because there's like the lifecycle library package, which just takes an image util image. And I think it has methods like, okay, is this found, right? But I don't think there's anything that's like, if not found, then pull. But I have to look at the code.
Yeah.
So basically, like this whole thing that I brought up is like, why, if there's an existing expectation that when you run the life cycle, hey, your images are available, right? You've done the work to ensure that they are reachable, then wouldn't that same kind of requirement translate to if you're using OCI layout? Well, we expect that the images are there, right, on disk. Otherwise, it's not going to work, just like it wouldn't work for any of the other cases.
Yes and no, right? So like, let's talk through, and maybe this is wrong, but like dynamic run image selection. That's I think maybe the thing that breaks the camel's back is if we need dynamic runtime selection, there's no way for Pack to know that right now. Right? And so therefore there's no way for Pack to load that into disk for if we go down this OCI layout path.
But there's also no way for Pack to load that into the daemon either, right? That's why we have to like be sure what the lifecycle does. Maybe it does do a pull, like an implicit pull or something, in which case, like, okay, we set ourselves up for failure. But we have to double check. Maybe Jesse knows.
Yeah, but I mean, true. But I would say that because you currently have daemon, what is it called? Daemon access, you could theoretically do a pull, right, for that run dynamic run image.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of going back to like, why is that a problem, right? If you're using Docker files and you're using runtime, like dynamic runtime image selection, but you haven't preloaded your files on disk, then like, okay, too bad, right? Like, I mean, I don't see why we have to abandon the whole approach just because it wouldn't work in like a specific scenario that maybe isn't going to capture a lot of people.
Well, because there's an alternative approach that would work hypothetically 100% of the time.
Oh, what's that?
And then the life cycle would be even further simplified because then there is no OCI component and it only operates through registries.
Ah.
So think about it from that perspective. Now you're like, oh, now there's two benefits, right? So hey, let's go down that path instead, right? That's kind of where I think we're our mindset is at, right? Is the life cycle ends up only talking registry, and it's really up to the platform to essentially create a proxy for that registry that says, okay, you know what, I need this. I'll pull it from the daemon, push it to the daemon, so forth, right?
And that is something that we talked about with the like the Conico work to support Docker files. It's sort of like a rather than build in all this logic to the lifecycle, that it knows how to cache and retrieve layers, from Kaneko, kind of like do the translation to be able to determine whether a layer has already been created. Just have it talk to a registry instead, and then Kaneko takes care of it, right? Like, we don't have to build that logic in if we're not directly dealing with it first, right? So that would simplify that implementation also.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that, because I thought my understanding from the whole conical piece was conical operations, like you're still taking the Docker file and using it as build instructions, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the part that I'm a little bit confused of is, how do you remove the complexity there when talking about a registry?
Could be that our just current usage of Kaneko like is broken somehow, but there's work that Kaneko does to ensure, like, for example, if you change a build instruction in your Docker file, it's supposed to invalidate all the cache layers, right? That come after, right? And so far as I know, our POC is not doing that, right? And we sort of talked about like what glue do we need to create so that this will work, right? And if it's, I don't know, somehow if it goes through a registry, it will work.
What?
I'm now speaking very, very much out on the fringes of what I understand.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong. I'm just thinking back. I don't know. I mean, I might need to go away and come back with more information.
Another vacation already? Jeez.
No. I'll send you a thread that probably Jesse has explained this better already, but I'll send you a thread where he kind of laid out why it was beneficial.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think if anything, it would be an added benefit, right? But there wouldn't be a conflict.
Registry or no registry, we need to either start reading and writing TARs and OCI layout, or stand up a registry in our extender that we can push to. This decision may also influence our cache decisions. I'm like remembering. I just think caching doesn't work in general in our POC, and we don't really know why. But the registry simplifies it, and I can't remember anymore than that.
Yeah, I think the part that's really interesting to me from a registry standpoint is now that there would be a proxy, or Pack would create this proxy. I do wonder whether or not we'll run into a challenge where certain things are added to the registry that may not be intended to go into the daemon, right? So like think like ephemeral things or something, right? And like basically, how do we identify those, right? How do we identify like, oh, it actually wanted this image to go there, so therefore we're gonna like actually take that image and put it into the daemon, versus like this other image that was created, we don't want that one in the daemon, right? Or maybe we do, and I think that's the maybe challenging part, is we just don't know the answer to how that would work exactly.
You're thinking about like ephemeral builders and stuff.
Yeah, thinking about ephemeral builders, thinking about if let's say that the life cycle somehow chooses to use the same registry, which actually wouldn't make sense, because it wouldn't know if it's an ephemeral proxy registry or if it's like GCR, right? Like I'm pretty sure you don't want to do that with GCR. So yeah, maybe that doesn't make sense. Like lifecycle probably wouldn't be using the proxy registry. And then the other challenge I think Juan captured from Jesse was that something to do with networking and security, right? So very, the simple answer that I could think of, or the simple challenge I could think of, is making sure that the lifecycle has access to the registry via networking. And so, there's some networking limitations, or sometimes it could be a little bit challenging between Mac OS or Docker Desktop and Linux specifically. And so I think we want to do a POC first to make sure that we're not going to run into anything unexpected there, because Pack does already muck around with network a little bit. And so there might be competing options or challenges. Yeah, so in Pack, you could specify network and you could say like network none, right? And then we actually start the container with no network. And if that is so, how is it they're going to reach the proxy registry, right? So little things like that, but I'm sure we could solve those.
Are those captured? Should I go back and watch the implementation sync from last week, or like where are those insights discoverable?
I would definitely say at this point, that's a really good jumping off point to go into that recording. Then I know Juan is, correct me if I'm wrong, Juan, because now I'm speaking for you, but going to update the RFC with a little bit more detail as to that decision or option.
Yeah, well, yes, probably my idea is to present what we already have. There are 4 more options in the current RFC, including the registry only approach. So I would like to get feedback on that. And then probably if people says, yes, let's go with the registry only because it seems to cover all the cases we want. Then yeah, probably get more details about it. But what I don't want to do is adding more details maybe to the OCI layout, and probably it's going to be, this car. So it makes no sense to invest more time on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be nice to know, Natalie, whether the life cycle does a daemon pull, because I think that would help at least maybe help us make a decision there. But yeah, like that dynamic run image or anything where we're going to try to pull something that it's not aware of is going to be problematic.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like we're going to discuss some of this in working group as well. Is that what you're thinking, Juan?
Yeah.
Getting that decision made. Cool. All right. Anything else?
Not from me.
All right. Then I guess we'll call it early. Get 15 minutes back. Have y'all.
Bye, guys.
Have an awesome day.